Measure What Matters by John Doerr. Imagine this scene. The year is 1999. The internet is still this wild, untamed frontier, full of possibility and chaos. And in a cluttered office sitting right above an ice cream parlor in Palo Alto, California, two brilliant Stanford dropouts are perched on top of what could be a gold mine. Their tiny startup? It's called Google. Their mission sounds almost ridiculously ambitious. Organize all the world's information. And they've got this search algorithm that's light years ahead of anything else out there. Here's what they don't have: a business plan, or any real management experience whatsoever. They're your classic visionaries, overflowing with world-changing ideas. But there's this wise saying that goes, ideas are easy, execution is everything. And that's exactly where our story really kicks into gear. Because this brilliant, chaotic, wonderfully disorganized little company was teetering on the edge of either completely changing the world or fizzling out like countless startups before it. Enter John Doerr, one of Silicon Valley's most legendary venture capitalists. He's just placed the biggest bet of his entire career, dropping $11.8 million for a 12% stake in Google. But he's not just there to sign a check and walk away. He's arrived bearing a gift. A secret weapon, really. It's a simple yet profoundly powerful system for execution that he learned from one of history's greatest managers. This system would eventually become the scaffolding for Google's absolutely meteoric rise. It would help them grow 10 times bigger, over and over again. It would drive the creation of products we now use every single day, from Gmail to Chrome to Android. So what was this gift? It's a system called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. And here's what you're about to discover. This simple idea is way more than just a business tool. It's a completely different way of thinking, a way of operating that has powered not only Google, but also rock stars like Bono in his fight to end poverty, and the Gates Foundation in their mission to wipe out deadly diseases. My promise to you is this: by the time we're done here, you'll understand the one fundamental secret that separates the dreamers from the doers. You'll learn about the 4 superpowers this system unlocks, and through some incredible true stories, you'll see how the most successful people and organizations in the world set and actually achieve their most audacious goals. This isn't just about business tactics. This is about learning how to measure what truly matters in your own life so you can achieve things that once seemed completely impossible. So let's dive in. Every great story has an origin. And the story of this powerful goal-setting system doesn't start at Google. It starts decades earlier, in the fiery heart of Silicon Valley, with a man who was, by every account, an absolute force of nature. His name was Andy Grove. Grove was a Hungarian refugee who had barely escaped the Nazis, arriving in America with almost no money and very little English. But through sheer force of will and a brilliant mind, he rose to become the CEO of one of the most important companies in the world, Intel. John Doerr was a young engineer at Intel back in the 1970s, and he describes Grove as the greatest manager he had ever seen. Grove had this saying that became Doerr's personal mantra: ideas are easy, execution is everything. See, Grove had worked at another company before Intel, a place called Fairchild, which was packed with brilliant people. But he noticed this fatal flaw there. Expertise was highly valued, but turning that expertise into actual results? That was treated like an afterthought. Grove was absolutely determined that Intel would be different. Intel, he declared, delivers. It almost doesn't matter what you know. It's what you can do with what you know. To ensure his company was a place of action, not just ideas, Grove created a system. He built it on the work of the legendary management thinker Peter Drucker, who had pioneered this idea called management by objectives, or MBOs. But Grove took it a step further. He streamlined it, made it more agile, and gave it a new name. He called them objectives and key results, or, as we know them today, OKRs. The system itself is deceptively simple. An objective is the what. It's where you want to go. It should be significant, concrete, action-oriented, and ideally, genuinely inspirational. An objective is like pointing to the top of a mountain and saying, "We are going to climb that." It's a clear, ambitious destination. Key results are the how. They are the measurable milestones that tell you whether you're actually making progress toward your objective. Grove insisted that a key result had to be measurable. There's no gray area. You either did it or you didn't. So, if the objective is to climb the mountain, the key results might be: establish a base camp at 15,000 feet by July 1st, acclimatize the team for 10 days, and reach the summit by August 15th. They're specific, time-bound, and completely verifiable. This simple framework, objective and key results, became the absolute lifeblood of Intel. It was the system that allowed them to manage tens of thousands of people, to achieve microscopic precision in manufacturing the microprocessors that would power the digital revolution. And it was this very system that was put to the ultimate test in a now legendary corporate battle known as Operation Crush. In the late 1970s, Intel, the actual inventor of the microprocessor, was getting beaten badly. A faster, easier-to-program chip from a competitor called Motorola was stealing huge chunks of their market share. The situation was dire. One district sales manager sent a desperate 8-page telex to headquarters, basically a 5-alarm fire that landed directly on Andy Grove's desk. Grove and his team didn't panic. They acted. Within weeks, they had assembled a task force to map out a counteroffensive. The mission was given a name that left absolutely no room for doubt: Operation Crush. One of the leaders, Jim Lally, rallied the troops with this fiery speech: "We have to kill Motorola. We have to crush those guys." The objective was crystal clear: establish Intel's 8086 chip as the highest performance, 16-bit microprocessor family. This top-level objective cascaded down through the entire company. The marketing team had OKRs to repackage the products. The engineering team had OKRs to get a faster version of the chip into production. And the sales team was given one of the most daring key results in tech history: achieve 2,000 design wins in a single year, meaning convincing 2,000 different companies to build their products around Intel's chip. What happened next was a masterclass in execution. The entire company, everyone pulling in the same direction, turned on a dime. They didn't change the product itself. They changed the entire terms of engagement. They revamped their marketing to focus not just on the chip's speed, but on the entire ecosystem of support and services that Intel provided. They stopped selling to engineers and started selling to CEOs. And that audacious goal of 2,000 design wins? By the end of the year, they had routed the enemy and secured 500 wins. Intel had won, and OKRs were their secret weapon. Now let's fast forward 20 years. It's 1999, and John Doerr, the young engineer who witnessed Operation Crush firsthand, is now a powerful venture capitalist. And he's standing in front of a small group of about 30 people at a tiny startup called Google, all gathered around a ping-pong table that doubles as their boardroom. He sees the exact same pattern he saw decades ago: brilliant minds, a revolutionary idea, but a desperate need for a system to channel all that raw energy. So he opens his presentation and defines OKRs, a management methodology that helps to ensure that the company focuses efforts on the same important issues throughout the organization. He tells them the story of Operation Crush. He shows them how a clear objective, backed by measurable key results, can align an entire company to achieve the impossible. The young founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, were definitely intrigued. They had zero formal business training, but they were absolutely obsessed with data, and they understood the power of a clear organizing principle. Sergey said, "Well, we need to have some organizing principle. We don't have one, and this might as well be it." It was a perfect fit. OKRs were a data-driven system for a data-worshipping company. They were transparent for a team that defaulted to being open. They rewarded big, bold bets for two of the boldest thinkers of their generation. Google didn't just adopt OKRs. They embraced them with an intensity that would define their entire culture. In the early years, Larry Page himself would spend 2 full days every quarter personally reviewing the OKRs for every single software engineer. The system became, as former CEO Eric Schmidt put it, the simple tool that institutionalized the founders' think big ethos. And the rest, as they say, is history. That little company Doerr bet on would go on to become one of the most valuable and influential companies in the world, with 7 different products that each have over 1 billion users. And to this day, nearly 2 decades after that meeting around the ping-pong table, OKRs remain a core part of Google's daily life. So the question is, why? What is it about this simple system that makes it so incredibly powerful? John Doerr says that OKRs give organizations 4 superpowers. And if you understand these 4 powers, you'll understand the secret to world-class execution. The first superpower is focus and commit to priorities. Measuring what matters begins with asking one critical question: what is most important for the next 3 months? Successful organizations and successful people focus on the handful of initiatives that can make a real difference, while consciously deferring the ones that are less urgent. As Steve Jobs famously said, innovation means saying no to 1,000 things. A healthy OKR system limits you to 3 to 5 objectives per cycle. This forces you to make hard choices. It's a precision tool that clarifies what you're saying yes to, and just as importantly, what you're saying no to. This power of focus is beautifully illustrated in the story of a young entrepreneur named Brett Kopf. Growing up, Brett struggled massively in school. He was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, and sitting still at a desk felt like absolute torture. He was always messing around, he couldn't organize his work, and he started to believe the kids who called him stupid. Then, in his junior year, a teacher named Denise Whitefield changed his life. Every single day she would sit with him and ask, "What do you have to do today?" Brett would list everything off: a history worksheet, an English essay, a math test, and she would say something incredibly wise: "Okay, let's just pick one and talk about it. One thing at a time." She gave him the precious gift of focus, and with that focus, he started to get things done. He started to believe in himself. Years later, Brett co-founded a company called Remind, an app that helps teachers, students, and parents communicate safely and securely through text messages. In the early days, the company was growing like crazy, but it felt totally chaotic, like they were being pulled in 1,000 different directions. They had this long to-do list, but no clear priority. When John Doerr introduced Brett to OKRs, it was like finding his teacher, Mrs. Whitefield, all over again. The system forced him and his team to ask, what is the one big thing we need to do this quarter? For example, one of the most requested features from teachers was a repeated message function. It was a good idea, a classic delight feature. But when they looked at their OKRs, they had to ask the tough question: Will this feature move the needle on our primary objective for user engagement? The answer was no. So they made the hard choice to shelve it. Without the discipline and focus of OKRs, Brett says, they might not have held their ground. That's the first superpower, ruthless focus on what truly matters. But focus alone isn't enough. You also need commitment. And this brings us to the story of another founder, Jeannie Kim. Jeannie's company Nuna is deeply personal. When she was 9 years old, her younger brother Kimong was diagnosed with severe autism. The task of navigating the complex healthcare system and signing her immigrant family up for Medicaid fell to her. That experience planted a seed. Years later, after working as a product manager at Google, she founded Nuna with an audacious goal: to use data to make the healthcare system work better for the millions of people who need it most. As a former Googler, Jeannie was sold on the power of OKRs from day one, so she tried to implement them at her small startup. And it failed, miserably. Some people never set their individual OKRs. Others set them and then stuck them in a drawer. The process just didn't take. Why? Jeannie realized she had missed a crucial step. For structured goal setting to work, the leaders have to commit to the process first. It's not enough to talk a good game. You have to model the behavior. So, in 2016, they tried again. This time, Jeannie led the charge. She shared her own individual OKRs at an all-hands meeting, making herself publicly accountable to her entire team. She would email her contributors to create their OKRs. If they didn't respond, she'd ping them on Slack. If they still didn't listen, she'd literally go find them in person and say, "Please do your OKRs." It worked. When the team saw that their CEO was truly committed, not just to her own goals, but to the entire process itself, they rallied. OKRs forced conversations that wouldn't have happened otherwise. The team got aligned. They started acting purposefully on their plans. And today, Nuna has built a secure data platform for the private health information of over 74 million Americans, genuinely transforming the U.S. healthcare system. As Jeannie learned, commitment starts at the top. When leaders publicly commit to their objectives and to the system itself, it creates a culture where everyone feels accountable. That leads us directly to the second superpower: align and connect for teamwork. In most companies, goals are basically a secret. The CEO might know the top priorities, but a study of thousands of senior executives found that a majority couldn't even name their company's top priorities. Think about that for a second. If the leaders don't know where they're going, how can anyone else possibly know? OKRs solve this by making everything transparent. In an OKR system, the most junior intern can look up the goals of the CEO. Everyone's goals are openly shared. This transparency is the express lane to operating excellence. This creates what Doerr calls alignment. It links the work of every individual to the team's efforts, the department's projects, and the overall mission of the company. Imagine a rowing team. If one person is rowing east and another is rowing west, they'll burn up tons of energy going absolutely nowhere. Alignment is about getting everyone in the boat rowing in the same direction. The story of MyFitnessPal is a powerful lesson in the pain of misalignment. Mike Lee and his brother Albert created the world's leading health and fitness app, basically from their own savings and credit cards. In the early days, when it was just the two of them, alignment was super simple. They'd declare a goal, launch the app on the iPad, and talk every day about their progress. But then, the company started to grow. They went from 2 people to 10, then to 30, and suddenly, things got really complicated. One product manager was working on the premium subscription version of the app. Another was working on the platform that let devices like Fitbit connect to it. A third was working on the core login experience. All three had their own OKRs. The problem was the shared engineering team. They were getting pulled in three different directions at once. Their work wasn't aligned with the product managers' objectives. Their efficiency absolutely plummeted as they switched between projects, trying to please whoever was yelling the loudest. The wake-up call came when a top priority marketing OKR was doomed before it even started. The marketing team had this great plan to drive user engagement with personalized emails, but no one had thought to inform engineering, which had already set its own priorities for the quarter. The project was completed a full quarter late. That's when they realized they needed more than just good OKRs. They needed alignment between teams. They started holding integration meetings each quarter where department heads would present their goals and, crucially, identify their dependencies on other teams. No one left the room until they had answered the basic questions. Are we all on the same page? Is one team overstretched? How can we make sure we're all rowing together? This act of connecting teams horizontally across departmental lines is where the real magic of alignment happens. It breaks down silos. We see this beautifully in the story of Intuit, the company behind TurboTax and QuickBooks. When Atticus Tyson became the Chief Information Officer, the IT department was stuck in the past, really struggling to keep up as the company moved to the cloud. It was a conventionally siloed organization, where activity was totally opaque. People in one department had no idea what was happening in another. Atticus decided to pilot OKRs within his 600-person IT group. And he made a critical decision. The goals had to be visible to everyone in the company, even if no one outside his department actually used them. He wanted everyone to know exactly what they were doing and why. The results were genuinely transformative. With open, public goal setting, teams that needed to work together could see it from the very start. The data and analytics team could see what the financial systems team had in mind, and it was immediately obvious they should be collaborating. They linked up their objectives in real time, rather than after the fact. This horizontal connection is what allows companies to move with real speed and agility. And it nurtures a culture where the best idea wins, not the biggest title. This brings us to superpower number 3, track for accountability. Traditional business goals are often set at the beginning of the year and then basically forgotten. They become zombie OKRs, on-paper goals with no life or actual meaning. OKRs, by contrast, are living, breathing organisms. They're meant to be tracked, revised, and adapted as circumstances change. This requires a real system for tracking progress. To keep OKRs from becoming just another dusty list, you need a way to see how you're doing. Many companies use dedicated cloud-based software that provides a digital dashboard where users can create, track, edit, and score their OKRs with just a few clicks. But honestly, the tool is less important than the habit. Regular check-ins, preferably weekly, are absolutely essential to prevent slippage. This isn't about micromanagement. It's about creating a continuous feedback loop. Good news or bad, reality intrudes. This allows you to either get a struggling project back on track, or 2, fail fast and pivot in a new direction. Perhaps no organization understands the importance of tracking better than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In the year 2000, the foundation was born as something the world had never seen, a $20 billion startup. Their mission was one of the most audacious imaginable. Everyone deserves a healthy and productive life. They enlisted brilliant people from the world of global health and told them to quit thinking about incremental progress. What would you do, they asked, if you had unlimited resources? The stakes were astronomically high. When you're waging war against diseases like malaria, polio, and HIV, you can't afford to guess if your strategies are working. You need real-time data. You need to track what matters. Patty Stonesifer, the Foundation's former CEO, brought in OKRs to provide that disciplined system. They used them to make incredibly hard choices. For instance, they used a metric called disability-adjusted life years to measure the impact of different investments. This data-driven framework led them to focus heavily on vaccines, which make an enormous difference in productive life years. Bill Gates, a huge fan of goals, absolutely loved the system. The OKR process made him confident that the Foundation was making the right calls. He says having a good mission is not enough. You need a concrete objective, and you need to know how you're going to get there. For the Gates Foundation, OKRs provide that path. For a top-line objective like the global eradication of malaria by 2040, the key results are the concrete, trackable steps they must take. Things like proving a new cure-based approach can work, and preparing to scale it up by creating the necessary tools. This ability to track progress, to measure what matters, is what allows them to stay accountable to their monumental goal. It's what gives them a real chance to actually succeed. This idea of aiming for something monumental brings us to the fourth and final superpower: stretch for amazing. OKRs are not just about doing your job. They're about pushing yourself and your team far beyond your comfort zones. They lead us to achievements that live right on the border between our abilities and our dreams. As Bill Campbell, the legendary coach to leaders like Steve Jobs and Larry Page, used to say, if companies don't continue to innovate, they're gonna die. And I didn't say iterate, I said innovate. Conservative goal setting absolutely stymies innovation. OKRs are designed to fight against that. Google, for example, divides its OKRs into two categories: committed, goals, and aspirational, or stretch goals. Committed objectives are the things that must get done. They're tied to the company's core metrics: product releases, sales numbers, hiring. These are expected to be achieved in full, 100%. Aspirational objectives, on the other hand, are the big, hairy, audacious goals. They're the moonshots. They reflect bigger picture, higher risk, future-tilting ideas. For these goals, failure is an option. In fact, it's expected. Google considers an average achievement rate of 70% on stretch goals to be a success. If you're hitting 100% on all your stretch goals, you're not stretching enough. This culture of stretching is at the absolute heart of Google's Gospel of 10x. Larry Page believes that a 10% improvement means you're just doing the same thing as everybody else. He expects Googlers to create products and services that are 10 times better than the competition. This isn't about working 10 times harder. It's about rethinking a problem from the ground up. It forces you to start over. The story of Google Chrome is a perfect example of a stretch goal in action. In 2008, Sundar Pichai, who is now the CEO of Google, was the vice president in charge of a new project, building a web browser from absolute scratch. The market was dominated by Microsoft's Internet Explorer. Building a new browser was an enormous task. Eric Schmidt, Google's CEO at the time, warned him, "If you're doing it, you had better be serious about it." Sundar and his team set a top-level stretch OKR for the year of Chrome's launch. The objective was to develop the next-generation client platform for web applications. The key result was audacious. Chrome reaches 20 million 7-day active users. They were starting from zero. Sundar himself admits, "Candidly, I thought there was no way we would get there." But he knew that putting that big number out there would force the team to think bigger and push harder. It made complacency impossible. At the end of the year, they had failed. They hadn't reached 20 million users. But the failure made them dig deeper. They asked themselves, what are we going to do differently? They found new ways to distribute Chrome, and even launched the largest offline marketing campaign in Google's history to explain to people what a browser actually was. The next year, in 2009, they set another stretch goal, 50 million users. They failed again, ending the year at 38 million. For 2010, undeterred, Sundar proposed a target of 100 million. Larry Page pushed back. He thought it wasn't ambitious enough. They eventually settled on a new OKR, 111 million users. To reach it, they knew they had to completely reinvent the business of Chrome. They expanded to Mac and Linux platforms. They launched new marketing campaigns. And finally, after years of trying, failing, and learning, they hit their goal. Today, Chrome has over 1 billion active users on mobile alone. They never would have gotten there without those early, failed stretch goals that forced them to constantly rethink what was possible. As Larry Page says, if you set a crazy, ambitious goal and miss it, you'll still achieve something remarkable. And sometimes, you actually hit it. This is the story of YouTube's billion-hour goal. By 2012, YouTube was already one of the biggest video platforms in the world. But they had a problem. They were measuring success by the number of views or clicks. This led to a world of clickbait, misleading thumbnails, and sensationalist titles designed to get you to click, even if the video itself was absolutely terrible. An engineer named Christos Goudreau started pushing for a radical idea. He argued that YouTube's true currency wasn't views, it was watch time. The logic was simple. When users spend more of their valuable time watching videos, they must be happier with those videos. It took 6 months of argument, but he won. In March of 2012, YouTube officially changed its core metric from views to watch time. That same year, at a leadership summit, a new, monumentally audacious stretch goal was announced. The objective: reach 1 billion hours of watch time per day. It was a 10x increase from where they were. Most people at the company thought it was impossible. They thought it would literally break the internet. But this clear, measurable objective energized the entire organization. Susan Wojcicki, who became CEO of YouTube in 2014, inherited this massive goal. At the time, they were behind schedule. Christos Goudreau, the guardian of the OKR, was, in his words, freaked out. But the OKR became their North Star. It guided every single decision. The engineer started hunting for changes that might yield as little as 0.2% more watch time. In 2016 alone, they found 150 of those tiny advances. And then, one Monday in the fall of 2016, ahead of schedule, they hit it. 1 billion hours of watch time in a single day. They had achieved the stretch goal that everyone thought was impossible. These 4 superpowers, focus, align, track, and stretch, are the engine of the OKR system. But goals and metrics don't exist in a vacuum. To truly bring them to life, you need something more. You need a human voice. This brings us to the final, and perhaps most important, part of the puzzle, the shift to a new world of work. John Doerr introduces a younger sibling to OKRs, a system he calls CFRs. It stands for Conversations, Feedback, and Recognition. If OKRs are the skeleton of your strategy, CFRs are the heart and soul. They're the human interactions that make the system actually work. The old world of work was defined by the dreaded annual performance review, a process that is costly, exhausting, and mostly futile. It's a backward-looking judgment that often demoralizes even the best employees. The new world of work replaces this with continuous performance management, and CFRs are the instrument for it. Conversations are authentic, ongoing dialogues between managers and their team members about progress and development. This isn't a once-a-year judgment. It's a regular, forward-looking coaching session. Feedback is bidirectional communication among peers. In the new world of work, feedback isn't just top-down. It's a 360-degree conversation where everyone helps each other improve. And recognition is about expressing appreciation for contributions of all sizes. It's about celebrating the small wins that build momentum and create a culture of genuine gratitude. The software company Adobe is a powerful example of this transformation. For years, they were saddled with the traditional annual review. It took up 80,000 manager hours a year and caused a spike in employees quitting every February. In 2012, an executive named Donna Morris decided to do something radical. She announced that Adobe was completely abolishing the annual review. In its place, they created a system called Check-in, a new mode of continuous performance management built on regular conversations and feedback. The results were stunning. Voluntary attrition dropped by 30%. Involuntary departures, meaning people who weren't a good fit, rose by 50%. They were keeping their best people and helping those who weren't thriving to move on, all while saving over 100,000 manager hours a year. We see this beautifully in the story of Zoom Pizza, a startup using robots to take on the giants of the pizza delivery industry. From very early on, they implemented both OKRs and CFRs. OKRs gave them the discipline to focus on what mattered most, like deploying their fleet of baking-on-the-way trucks. CFRs created a culture of real connection and trust. Every 2 weeks, each person at Zoom has a 1-hour one-on-one conversation with their manager where they don't talk about work. The agenda is the individual, their personal and professional goals, their dreams, what makes them happy, what saps their energy. This focus on the whole person is what builds a truly great culture. And culture, as the saying goes, eats strategy for breakfast. OKRs and CFRs are not just tools for execution, they're tools for building culture, a culture of transparency, accountability, and empowerment. And this brings us full circle to our final story. When the rock star Bono co-founded the One Campaign, an organization dedicated to fighting extreme poverty and preventable disease, it was like a band. A small group of passionate punk rock activists who were brilliant at picking one fight at a time, like debt cancellation for the poorest countries, and winning. But as the organization grew, it became a victim of its own success. They had too many goals. Girls, education, a green revolution in Africa, energy poverty. They were all over the map. They were stretching too thin, and people were getting worn out. Bono says, OKRs saved us, really. They forced the organization to think clearly about what they could realistically achieve with the resources they had. They gave them a frame to hang their passion on. As Bono puts it, if the heart doesn't find a perfect rhyme with the head, then your passion means nothing. The OKR framework cultivates the madness, the chemistry contained inside it. And it was this framework that allowed them to make one of the most important cultural shifts in their history. Early on, John Doerr asked them a simple question: who's the client here? They answered, the world's poorest and most vulnerable. John pressed them, well then, do they have a seat at the table? That question seeded a pivot that completely transformed the organization. They realized that they, a group of mostly Western activists, could not end poverty in Africa without a full partnership with Africans themselves. Africa's future had to be decided by Africans. So they set an OKR. The objective: proactively integrate a broad range of African perspectives into one's work. The key results were concrete and measurable. Hire 3 African-based staff by April. Approve 2 African board members by July. Develop relationships with at least 10 leading African thinkers. This OKR drove a fundamental culture change. It pivoted them from working on Africa to working in and with Africa. It was the structure that allowed their passion to be guided by true partnership. And that, in the end, is the deepest lesson of this book. Ideas are easy, passion is abundant, but execution is everything. Whether you're building a search engine, fighting a disease, making a pizza, or trying to save the world, the principles are the same. You must choose what truly matters. You must align your efforts with those around you. You must track your progress. And you must have the courage to stretch for the things that seem just beyond your reach. That is how you measure what matters. And that is how you change the world. As we wrap up our journey through Measure What Matters, it's easy to get caught up in the stories of Google's moonshots or Bono's global campaigns and think, that's great for them, but what does this have to do with me? And that's honestly a fair question. You're not running a multi-billion-dollar company, at least not yet. You're navigating school, thinking about your future, trying to figure out your place in the world. But the beauty of the OKR system is in its scalability. The principles that guide a company of thousands can also guide a team of one. They can guide you. At its core, this book is about one thing: intention. It's about moving from a life of passive reaction to a life of purposeful action. We all have dreams, big and small. We want to get better grades, make the varsity team, learn a new skill, or start a project we care about. But so often, those dreams remain just that. Dreams. They're vague and distant, like clouds on the horizon. We lack a map to get there. OKRs are that map. They force you to translate your vague desires into a concrete destination, your objective, and a clear, measurable path to get there, your key results. This simple act of writing things down, of defining what success looks like, is honestly a revolutionary act. It makes your goals real. It makes them achievable. The superpower of focus is a powerful antidote to the distraction-filled world we live in. We are constantly being pulled in a dozen different directions. The discipline of choosing just 3 to 5 things that truly matter each quarter or each semester is a skill that will serve you for the rest of your life. It teaches you to prioritize, to make trade-offs, and to invest your most precious resource, your time, wisely. The superpower of alignment is a lesson in teamwork and empathy. It reminds us that our goals don't exist in a vacuum. By making our goals transparent, by sharing them with others, we invite collaboration and support. We learn that we can achieve far more together than we ever could alone. The superpower of tracking teaches accountability. Not the scary kind of accountability where you're judged harshly for your failures, but the empowering kind where you own your progress. Regular check-ins with yourself or with a mentor or a friend create a feedback loop that allows you to learn, adapt, and genuinely grow. And finally, the superpower of stretching gives you permission to be ambitious. It encourages you to set goals that are uncomfortably exciting. It teaches you that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a part of it. It's in the striving, in the reaching for something just beyond your grasp, that you discover what you're truly capable of. So how can you start applying this today? It's simpler than you think. First, pick one area of your life where you want to make a real change in the next 3 months. Maybe it's academics, a personal project, or your health. Write down a single, inspirational objective. For example, master my calculus class and build a foundation for college success. Second, define 3 to 5 measurable key results. Don't write, study more. That's an activity, not a result. Instead, write things like, achieve a grade of 90% or higher on all 3 exams, complete all homework assignments 24 hours before they are due, and attend professor's office hours twice a month to clarify concepts. Third, share your OKR with someone, a parent, a teacher, a friend. This is your first CFR, a conversation that creates accountability and opens the door for feedback and support. That's it. That's the whole system in a nutshell. That was our summary of Measure What Matters by John Doerr. We've certainly hit the big ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. Listening to a summary is like looking at a travel brochure. The real adventure, the real transformation, happens when you take the journey yourself. The magic is in the details of the stories, in the quiet moments when a particular phrase or a simple idea connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is your map, designed to help you see if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I encourage you to grab a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just about learning a system. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you approach your goals and your life. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and you want to continue exploring the ideas in the world's most influential books, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track, and it ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing together.